Hi guys, welcome to my first vlog on skills and capacities in the weight room, where I'm going to be looking at a squat and a hang snatch. Throughout the video I'm going to analyse each movement to determine if the issues are due to skill or capacity limitations. I'm going to highlight each issue through additional tests and provide examples on ways to fix the problems with corrective exercises and other exercise alternatives. The first athlete we're going to have a look at lacks the skill in being able to perform a proper squat. Immediately it can be seen that there's a lack of depth, with the athlete falling just above parallel and quite a lot of forward lean. When slowed down, you can see that he reaches maximum ankle dorsiflexion quite early in the lift, meaning he has to create a lot of hip flexion to achieve more depth, contributing to this forward lean. Still images at full depth of the squat show that there is a lot of this hip flexion. His gaze is downward, contributing to this lean, and the bar is outside of his base of support, which puts a lot of pressure on the lower back to try and maintain his balance. Now, it initially might be thought that a lack of ankle range of motion might cause this forward lean, but further tests show that this is not the case, with 14 centimeters and 15 centimeters of ankle dorsiflexion shown in the left and right with the knee to wall test, and an active hip flexion test showing that he can get the depth or adequate hip flexion to reach at least parallel. Now, with this in mind, simple cues or exercises will hopefully teach the athlete the proper technique of a squat. Using physical cues like squatting up against or facing a wall will cue the athlete to initiate the squat with the hips and keep a more upright posture. Similarly, with a box squat or sitting back onto a bench, the athlete is forced to initiate the squat with the hips and sit back on the bench. Comparisons of before and after show significantly more upright posture, with gaze more forward and the bar line over the base of support with the box squat, meaning that forces can be applied more vertically. The second athlete we have here shows a lack of capacity in performing the squat. Similar to that of the previous athlete, there is a notable lack of depth and a lot of forward lean. However, with a more upright posture expected with a front squat, this forward lean does give us clues that there is something more substantial than motor control issues present. A front view shows us that there is a notable weight shift towards her left side, and at the bottom of the squat you can see that the line of her left knee is inside her foot. In contrast to the first athlete, she shows quite poor ankle range of motion, having previously torn ligaments in both ankles. Her knee to wall tests on the right show that she has 8 centimeters of dorsiflexion with 9 on the left. However, you can see quite a lot of knee valgus to access more range. And this poor range of motion is more than likely the biggest contributor to her forward lean. In regard to her hip mobility, she does show quite a decent hip range, with around 45 degrees on both. However, with a single leg squat test, you can see considerable knee valgus and poorer control on the left compared to the right, signifying a lack of strength, which will be the main contributor to this weight shift seen in the squat. Activation in corrective exercises then should be focused around the ankle and hip joints, where we've identified these problems to be. So mobility drills in foam rolling will help with our anterior knee translation, giving the athlete a more upright posture in the squat. Glute bridges and hip hitches and other exercises to activate the glute muscles will help balance out this strength deficiency, which is the main contributor to the weight shift. A hex bar deadlift will provide a great bilateral alternative to the squat, with split squats providing a great unilateral alternative, which will solve our asymmetry problems as well as minimizing need for ankle dorsiflexion. Moving on to the hang snatch, the first athlete we see here lacks the skill but has the capacity to be able to perform the movement. Initially, you can see in the start position, his knees aren't back far enough to be able to replicate the end of the first pull. This will affect the force produced in the second pull, as the athlete won't be able to use the stretch shortening cycle aspect of the transition phase before triple extension. When slowed down, it's clear that the athlete doesn't show any sign of a transition phase, pulling straight from just above the knees and lacks triple extension, meaning there will be a poor force production and the path of the bar comes quite far away from the body. Regarding further testing then, to highlight any limitations, an overhead squat test shows that the athlete, while holding a bar overhead, can reach parallel when squatting, meaning that he can catch the bar in a full snatch position. Shoulder flexion tests then show that he has adequate range of motion to be able to reach an overhead position without compensating by a rib flare or any excessive lumbar spine extension. Knowing it's a skill rather than a capacity issue then, coaching should focus on fixing the start position by moving the athlete's knees backwards, as well as coaching the athlete into a transition phase and more triple extension. By simply getting the athlete to jump from the correct starting position, there will be a forward translation of the knees, with torso coming more upright as the athlete naturally moves into a more efficient jump position. This will bring the bar closer to the power position and maximise triple extension, allowing for a more vertical force production, which can be seen here by the bar path being much closer to the body. The second example of the hang snatch shows an athlete with a lack of capacity in being able to perform the skill. Similar to the first example, this athlete needs to push his knees back further in the start position to replicate the end of the first pull. However, in contrast to the first athlete, capacity issues restrict him in doing so. In regard to catch position, it can be seen that there is a lack of depth, as well as his right arm being positioned further back than his left. Although a poor triple extension is seen in the second pull, this would be more of a coachable skill issue rather than a capacity issue. Knowing that the athlete has capacity issues, further tests are going to highlight the specific problems. Poor depth in his overhead squat test showed that he lacks the capacity to be able to reach full depth in the snatching catch position. There is also a noticeable rib flare to access more range, which allows him to position the bar overhead. His hip rotation test showed that he has very poor internal rotation, which will inevitably restrict this squat depth. His shoulder flexion test showed then that he has much more range in his right side compared to his left, which is seen in his catch position. Although on view from behind, it can be seen that he uses a lot of external rotation in his right side to achieve this increased range. We can see by his resting posture that his scapula lie quite far apart from each other, with his right slightly more depressed than the left. He also has quite poorly developed lower traps compared to his upper, which would be the main contributor to this asymmetry. At full extension then, there is a quite poor scapular upward rotation, with 48 degrees of rotation at max flexion, where we'd ideally be looking for around 55 degrees. We can use these tests then to guide our prescription of corrective exercises. For example, dead bugs are great to build anterior core strength and resist extension and prevent our rib flare seen. Prone Y lifts then will help strengthen our lower traps and improve the resting position of the scapulae. Other exercises then should focus on shoulder flexion, such as wall slides, which cue the athlete to pin their back in against the wall and pull their ribs in while sliding their shoulders into the overhead position. A single arm band overhead press then will put the athlete into this shoulder flexion, while the athlete also has to concentrate on keeping the ribs in. These unilateral exercises will be great to solve this asymmetry seen. Hip mobility exercises then, like a frog sit and Spider-Man, will help the athlete achieve full depth in the catch position. As the athlete struggles with an overhead position, alternative exercises like hex bar jumps or simply using the second pull of the snatch without the catch can be used instead of the full snatch. To recap and explain the differences then between skills and capacities, in terms of the squat, the first athlete lacked the coordination to be able to perform it properly. Performance was improved with cues and coaching, highlighting that it was a skill issue. The second athlete had clear mobility and strength issues, which would need to be developed, showing that she lacked the capacity to be able to perform the squat. With the hang snatch, the first athlete's performance was improved with coaching, telling us that it was a skill issue, while the second athlete's mobility issues would need to be developed to improve performance, telling us that he lacks the capacity.